Welcome back to Heroes Behind the Badge. This is part 2 of our conversation with
crime data expert Lynn Sipes
about the hidden reality behind America's crime statistics. In part 1, we learned about the shocking 44% increase in violent crime revealed by the National Crime Victimization Survey, data that most Americans never heard about. Today, we're exploring the real-world consequences of this statistical manipulation, from Baltimore's crime crisis to the debate over federal intervention in high crime cities. We're examining how incomplete data leads to dangerous policy decisions. We'll also discuss why the media isn't reporting the complete picture, the role of politics in crime reporting, and what this means for the safety of American families. This isn't just about numbers. It's about a human cost of misleading statistics and the brave law enforcement officers trying to protect communities with their hands tied behind their backs. Let's continue our conversation with Len.
So here's a great example of what we're talking about. So President Trump has threatened to send in the feds to Baltimore, Maryland, right? Mm-hmm. The governor of Maryland, the mayor of Baltimore, so many of the liberals are saying, well, that's unnecessary. Baltimore is the rate of crime in Baltimore is going down. It's safe. It's a safe city. We don't need your help. I look at the top 10 U.S. cities by homicide rate that you sent me. Mm-hmm. Baltimore, 4th in the country. Yeah. The highest rate of homicides of any city in America. Top U.S. cities by violent crime rate. Okay, not just homicide, but violent crime. Baltimore moves up to number 3, the third highest crime rate, violent crime rate in the country. Yes. So for Maryland's governor, for Baltimore's mayor to say that Baltimore is a safe city, that they really don't understand what they're talking about. Is that fair to say?
Look, when we're talking about sending the National Guard into a city, my 50 years in the criminal justice system basically says we've never done that before except for riots. Using them in terms of day-to-day crime is something that is a radical move that makes people feel uncomfortable. I mean, I look, one of the things that I do in terms of my writing is that I understand, and I think you all understand too, there are more independents in this country than there are Republicans or Democrats individually. Okay. So in my writings, I'm trying to be fair. I'm trying to get people to because if reporters who see my stuff and read my stuff and are influenced by my stuff, if I just come out and say President Trump is right, and we should be going in with the National Guard with every city, they would not pay attention to what I write. So this is a radical development on the part of the president. Will it work? Only the courts are going to be able to tell us, and time will be able to tell us if this is going to work. The early findings on the part of Washington, D.C., is that it is working. It is dramatically reducing crime. Should we do it in other cities? Well, I can guarantee you that there are advisors to President Trump basically begging him not to send the National Guard into other cities. Washington, D.C. is a unique city. It's the nation's capital. But do you really want to have these huge protests in these other cities? Are there different ways of doing it? And I think President Trump is basically sending a message to the rest of the country, basically saying you better get your act together in terms of violent crime in your city, or I'm going to come in with the National Guard and I'm going to come in with additional federal agents. I think he's using this as a warning to other cities. Will he do it in other cities? I don't know. I don't have a clue as to what's going to happen in terms of other cities, but I think the president is basically warning other people, and through media reports, other cities are beginning to take this seriously. Other cities are beginning to say, hey, you know what? Maybe they should come to my city. Maybe
it's the omnipresence of the police, right? I mean, we've heard that term used forever. If the police are out there, you see them, you're less inclined to commit a crime. I'm sure that's what's happening there in Washington, D.C. Yeah. And probably with the National Guard and the feds that have come in there, they're augmenting the locals. They're probably put together a task force. They're doubling up in cars or tripling up in cars, whatever they're doing. And they're able to go out there and proactively arrest people on warrants and go after the drug dealers and all the other lowlifes that are committing the crimes. You know, the thing of it is though, is you're talking about politics, and it's crazy. And you know, during my career, when I was working, and I ran a unit, we made 6,000 to 8,000 arrests per year. A very, very proactive unit. Craig knows about it. I mean, the unit was even recognized in Washington, D.C. as one of the most proactive police units in the country. And being proactive makes a massive difference. Well, once that unit, I had left, and once that unit kind of got disbanded and reorganized, the amount of violent crime and homicides went up exponentially. And, you know, when you make those kind of political decisions, who's talking about the fact that this mayor or this governor or whoever it may be that's made those decisions just cost somebody their life? How many people are dead now because of making those decisions? So the whole National Guard thing for me is like, look at Chicago. I saw these people interviewed in Chicago. They're begging for the National Guard. They can't even go and sit in their driveway in their car and not worried about getting jacked or shot. So why not put them in there? I think it's just a liberal Democratic fighting point. You know, if Trump were to cure cancer, he'd still be an idiot, you know? And so they're trying to fight him tooth and nail, to the extent that that ultimately could cost a lot of people's lives.
You go through Washington, D.C., and there are sections of Washington, D.C., where there are bars on every door and every window. I've been throughout the country, courtesy of the federal government, into high crime areas. And I've never been in a high crime area in my entire life where somebody said, you know what, this is fine. We're cool with this.
Right.
I've never encountered anybody, whether it be law enforcement or average citizens or community leaders, say, yeah, we're in a high crime area, but we really don't care. So, you know, what we're trying, I look at this as a human rights issue. I look at this as a human rights issue. And, you know, we talk about colleges being liberal places with liberal thoughts. When I went to college, I was taught that this is a human rights issue, that crime affects school scores, economies, jobs, the psychological development of younger people, that crime is insidious. It affects every part of every city in the United States in a very detrimental way. So if you want Baltimore to prosper, if you want DC to prosper, if you want any other city to prosper, you have to be able to control crime. And unless you're willing to control crime, you are throwing everybody in that area under the bus economically, socially, from a jobs point of view, from school scores to the psychological development of children. It affects everything. So, you know, from my studies, before going to the Department of Justice, it was, you know, really profound that this is something that we all need to work on together to make sure that the average person living in the average city in the United States has the right to feel safe in their own homes. Go to DC, look at all the bars on the doors and windows. Don't they have a right to feel safe?
So having said that, and based on your research, why is it that Democrats are always fighting and so opposed to law enforcement, enforcing the law, putting people in jail, and making people safe in this country?
I'm going to try to stay away from politics because, again, I've worked with progressives all throughout my career. I have the independence in mind, whatever it is that I say or write. I'm not quite sure it's Democrats, but at the same time, if you take a look at the data in terms of Democratic opinion versus Republican opinion versus white, black, income, you know, you're going to find variances in every survey depending upon the group. So yes, Republicans are probably much harder and much more supportive of law enforcement and proactive policing than Democrats. But to say that all Democrats are against proactive policing and all Democrats are not supportive of making sure that criminals are held accountable, I just feel uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, fair enough. And I'm not saying all of them. It just seems like it's quite a few of them.
Yeah, there are. There are, and I've worked with them over the course of years, and I've been in heated arguments with them throughout the course of years. I just did an article about there was a survey warning Democrats to stop being stupid on crime. It's on my website, crimeinamerica.net. I think it's last week's article. Basically, you have a think tank, a Democratic think tank, that is coming along and saying to progressives, you got to stop saying what you're saying. Criminals aren't clients; they're criminals. People returning from prison or inmates coming out of prison, they're not returning citizens. That you're shooting yourself in the foot by the words that you're using. So there are conservative Democrats who probably believe in everything that we're talking about now. But progressives, even the Democratic Party is taking them to the woodshed. There were huge fights during the Biden administration of the really far left progressives trying to change his policies in terms of crime. And Biden's advisors were furious with these people for trying to push Joe Biden far to the left. Joe Biden, when he was running, did say, per the American Civil Liberties Union, that he wanted to release 50% of the prison population. Now, Joe Biden has a long history of being tough on crime. So now we have Joe Biden, candidate Biden, saying he wants to release 50% of the prison population. Well, 66% of males in the United States in prison are there for violent crimes. If you take a look at their criminal history, it's probably closer to 80%. If you take a look at federal data in terms of recidivism, violent offenders have the highest rate of recidivism. So, Biden was actively trying to state as part of a campaign promise that he was willing to release hundreds of thousands of violent criminals. Now, that to me is absolutely insane. But you have the Raging Cajun, what's his name? Slips my mind at the moment. Who was the advisor to Clinton, basically saying defund the police was
talking about James Carville.
James Carville, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. That the three stupidest words in the English language were defund the police.
Defund the police.
And they did so much damage to Democrats. They said we can never get rid of the stench of it. Right. So within the Democratic Party, there is a war, literally a war going on internally, basically telling progressives, you really do need to rethink what it is you're saying and how you're saying it.
Yes. Yeah. I want to track back to something you said, Len, that I thought was very important. You made a very interesting statement. People have the right to feel safe. People have the right to feel safe. But here, let me try to blend that into something else you've already said too, that because of the incorrect or incomplete reporting of crime statistics, there is some government officials are trying to make us feel safe by pointing to the erroneous figures. So until we actually get the media, and you're a media relations expert, okay, I'd love your opinion on how do we get the media to start covering the whole picture?
The media, how do I say this? Throughout my career, I've done thousands and thousands of interviews at the national level, at the regional level, at the local level. And you had crime reporters who made my life miserable, but they knew the criminal justice system. They knew crime statistics. They knew crime statistics better than I knew crime statistics. They invested a lot of their time and a lot of their energy. And even though they made my life very difficult at times, they were fair. And they were the ones who stopped papers or television networks from reporting stupid stuff. They're no longer with us. The number of reporters who have vanished over the course of the last 10 years runs into the tens of thousands. The really good crime reporters who kept their own network and kept their own newspaper in check are no longer there. So, the person talking about crime today will tomorrow talk about a fire. The next day they talk about traffic problems. They don't have the background within the criminal justice system. So again, if I had the response, what the hell is the National Crime Victimization Survey? If I had $1 for every time so a reporter said that to me, I wouldn't, I could buy another truck. I could buy a new truck. I mean, it's just ridiculous as to how few people know what's going on in terms of crime in this country from a statistical and a research point of view.
Yeah. Len, I have two last questions. One is, and it shifts gears a bit, but how does the U.S. Crime rate compare to other countries? I'd like to think that we have the best law enforcement force anywhere in the world. I have faith in our criminal justice system to an extent, comparing it to other countries. But what does the data tell us? Is the U.S. safer than other countries, or are we one of the worst?
Okay, no, we have Gallup, and Gallup basically measures fear of crime, perceptions of crime throughout the world. And we are not even close to being one of the most dangerous countries in the world, not even close. I mean, we've got Central America, South America, South Africa, they're blowing up in terms of crime. The situation in terms of Mexico and the other countries that I just mentioned far outstrip what's going on in the United States. Now, when it comes down to trust in law enforcement, let me be clear. They said North American law enforcement, which includes Canada, that the highest rated, most trusted law enforcement agencies in the country are from North America. And being we far outstrip in terms of population compared to Canada, that means they're talking about the United States. The research in terms of the support of law enforcement, it doesn't, regardless of your demographics, the vast majority of Americans support law enforcement. The vast majority of Americans support law enforcement and want law enforcement in their communities. There are differences based upon race, income, where you live, blah, blah, blah. So law enforcement receives a lot of support from the United States. And so to summarize, we're the highest rated law enforcement in the world, as far as I'm concerned. And we're certainly don't even come close to being the most dangerous country.
That reinforces my view of law enforcement in America, the best in the world, the best historically in the world. Mm-hmm. And, if we had more cops and if we give them the resources they need to do their job, I think this country is going to be in really good shape. And that's what we're striving for at Citizens Behind the Badge. Give our law enforcement officers the resources they need to keep America safe and give them the respect that they deserve, the appreciation, the thanks, so that they continue to want to go out and risk their lives for our safety. Last question I had, I've been reading this from you for a couple years now. I think you've reported that there are 120 million porch package thefts in this country. And I know all of us are getting deliveries every day from Amazon and UPS, et cetera. That's a staggering statistic. Do I have that right? 120 million packages stolen every year?
Well, yeah, but it gets down to crime statistics, and it would take hours to fully address everything. But if you take a look at porch pirates, if you take a look at the FBI's latest data in terms of losses from identity theft, which are up 33%, The losses are up 33%. If you take a look at a variety of indices, cargo theft comes to mind, shoplifting comes to mind, retail theft comes to mind. They're all up dramatically, yet you take a look at the FBI's violent crime report, they're all down. So again, there's I could go on endlessly about this stuff. My concern is that we have politicians who are using the crime drop, and by the way, this is something that I've been saying to my friends in law enforcement and law enforcement organizations. There are people out there who are trying to make the case. Look, you're way down in law enforcement, yet crimes are plummeting. So cops don't mean anything. Cops are irrelevant. And I've been trying to say we need to be very proactive on the part of the organizations that represent law enforcement to make sure that they understand these statistics. The point that you're trying to make is completely irrelevant based upon a wide variety of data, but yet that's the point that they're trying to make. So not only is this an attack on crime statistics, it's an attack on law enforcement across the board. That's why I go back constantly to the National Academy of Sciences report, basically saying it's the only modality we have in terms of reducing crime in the United States. And so the data is with me, but nobody seems to understand the data.
The data's got to be out there for it to have an effect, doesn't it? You had some, in closing, I want to ask you a couple questions. Number one, crimeinamerica.net. That is how we find you, right, Len?
Yes, crimeinamerica.net.
And if somebody wants to reach out and get in touch with you, they can get it through that website?
They can get my email address is on the about page on my website.
Okay, so the about page will bring you to Len. Right. I want to ask you about, you said there are some very clear statistics about what is it when crime goes down. It's the proactivity of the police. Did I hear you say that right?
Yeah. I mean, so you have the mayors of Chicago and Baltimore basically dismissing the law enforcement activities. They're basically saying social programs and violence interrupters. There's no data whatsoever to support that. I'm not saying don't do violence interrupters. I'm not saying don't do social programs.
There's no data on it.
I'm simply saying that at the moment, in terms of good, solid research, it's been replicated and put into other cities to prove it. That doesn't exist. And
but there are stats on the other side saying that proactive police is the reason when crime is reduced. There are stats for that, correct?
Yes, but now the authors will basically say that it reduces crime. We're not quite sure how much, by how much. That becomes the caveat.
But big picture, it reduces crime.
Yeah, and it's the only modality that we have at the moment that says it reduces crime.
Isn't it almost common sense? Like if you're a toddler, if you're a child, and you know that if you do something, you're going to get disciplined for it, eventually you stop doing it. Yes. I mean, normally, if you don't get caught, you just keep doing it. It's kind of like you're empowered to continue to do that. That starts from childhood. If you're a criminal, if you're some low-life scumbag and you're out there doing your thing and nobody's ever arresting you or there's no proactive activity and you're not getting locked up, you're empowered. You just keep doing it and doing it and doing it.
It's you take a look at recidivism statistics. They're through the roof. Over the course of a 10-year period, I'm now going to guess it's about 85% coming back to the criminal justice system through an arrest, and it's about 60% reincarcerated. These are people coming out of the prison system. The parole and probation statistics are rather old, but it's still around 40% in terms of parole and probation, higher depending upon the other things that you look at. We have a problem of non-accountability. The Department of Justice documents all this stuff about millions of crimes being committed by people who have gone to prison. Millions of crimes. This stuff is well documented, again, by the Bureau of Justice Statistics. So we have a problem. We have a problem in terms of making sure that people are held accountable. Yes. In terms of the tragic stabbing of the young lady from Ukraine, that's just another example of the system out of hand, where there are 15 arrests, and I think it was Paul who suggested that it's not 15; it's just the 15 he's been called for.
That's right. Yeah. Len Sipes, you have been very, very generous with your time and, most importantly, your expertise. We have not had a guest like you on this podcast. We should do this more often.
I'd love to do it.
This is really at the heart of the problem, I think. It's the way the information is being managed, the way it's being disseminated, and unfortunately, just like we do in Heroes Behind the Badge and Citizens Behind the Badge, it's incorrect. And we're here to help correct that. And you are a big part of that today. Thank you.
We need to support law enforcement. We need to understand that the overwhelming majority of the men and women in law enforcement are decent human beings who just want to go home at the end of their shift.
Absolutely.
And until we come to that conclusion, until we understand that our support of law enforcement is absolutely crucial. And I would not be saying this if I didn't believe it. It's the average American agrees with me in terms of how they feel about law enforcement. Law enforcement themselves, the individual police officers, need to understand that the average person in this country is staunchly behind them.
Yes.
Yes. So there are detractors. The detractors will always be there.
Always.
But law enforcement is supported, and they're supported for a good reason.
Which is a good segue to our audience, to our listeners and viewers. A reminder that the Heroes Behind the Badge podcast that you just listened to with Len Sipes is brought to you by Citizens Behind the Badge. .org. You can reach us at citizensbehindthebadge.org. If you like this podcast, can I ask you a favor? If you like something that Len said, and boy, he gave us a lot to like, hit subscribe, hit follow, hit like, and then you'll be part of the family and you'll get to know first when new episodes release. And we already are planning new episodes. Even, I know, as good as this is, we're going to try to get somebody as good or better than Len on here for you. So again, we're signing off for this edition of Heroes Behind the Badge. On behalf of Billy Erfurth and Craig Floyd, this is Dennis Collins saying, we'll see you next time. And thanks, Len.
My pleasure.